the positive that came out of the struggle. It wasn't about hatred. It was about, hey, let's reach for the stars. We can do this. We can do this. We had what we called revolutionary principles. There were some things we simply would not do. They say that history repeats itself. History does not repeat itself. People repeat history. I think that what I have seen more often than not is that people like myself are viewed as a threat, even by people that you would think would be open.
Welcome to KLTV.news, your source for news that actually gives sources. I'm really excited about my guest today. His name is Larry Pinkney. He's a former member of the original Black Panthers. He spent 9 years in a Canadian prison for charges he denies and says he was a victim of a Cointel op. So Larry Pinkney, thank you for joining me today. I wanted to clarify what I first said, original Black Panthers. Why is it so important to clarify that?
It's extremely important to clarify that because the original Black Panthers, or I should say the Black Panther Party, which was founded in October of 1966, was very different from these frauds out here calling themselves Black Panthers. The original Black Panther Party was founded by Dr. Huey P. Newton and by Bobby Seale, and we need to make a distinction. A very clear distinction. So I'm glad you said original Black Panther Party.
Speaking of distinctions, I know that some have tried to compare Black Lives Matter, that movement, to the original Black Panther movement. How and why are they different?
Well, first of all, that comparison is disgusting, absolutely inaccurate, and by no means true. First of all, Black Lives Matter is extremely hypocritical, okay? I should call them Black Lives Matter Incorporated because they've made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that's what it's all about. And you don't see those dollars going into communities, and specifically Black communities throughout the United States. Also, let me be clear about this. The Black Panther Party, the original Black Panther Party, believed in equality and justice for all. That's black, white, brown, red, and yellow. We had alliances with people of all colors. We didn't say Black Lives Matter. We said, in essence, human life matters. That's to say all lives. So to say Black Lives Matter, you know, is really begging the question. Obviously, if all lives matter, then obviously Black Lives Matter if we're human. So let me just leave it at that. But one more thing. Black Lives Matter, the Inc., as I call them, the so-called organization, only apparently seem to care about Black lives that are somehow taken by police or white folks, when in fact, most Black lives that are snuffed out, I'm sad to say, are by other Black folks. So let's be clear about that. But you don't hear Black Lives Matter saying, oh, those lives matter, because apparently to them, those lives don't matter.
That goes along nicely with a little bit of the research I did on you. You talk about having been a victim of a Cointel op, and a FOIA request revealed a statement from your FBI file. It reads, Pinkney is potentially dangerous to his demonstrated ability to unify black and white. His associates are Negro, white, and Chinese. Special attention is being given to neutralizing him. The areas of sex and drugs appear to be the most effective ones to utilize. His habits in these areas are unknown, but are being monitored with this objective. It's very interesting that the FBI at that time said that it was potentially dangerous that you were able to unify black, white, and Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course. I mean, and let us be very candid. And I'm going to name a political party. The so-called Democrats, okay, they are exactly the same today. In the name of unifying, they are in fact dividing. They want to divide, divide, divide. And of course, in the 60s and the 70s, the FBI, and by the way, the Democrat Party was deeply involved in Cointelpro, the counterintelligence program, which was set up to frame, to discredit, to imprison, and in many cases, to murder.
Speaking of Cointel even BuzzFeed reported that nearly half in the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plant were FBI agents. Would you consider that a Cointel operation, or as the defense says, it was more like entrapment?
Well, what was Cointelpro, the counterintelligence program? It was entrapment. So let's call a spade a spade. Let's call it what it really is, all right? Cointelpro continues today, Christy, in many, many forms, in various forms. The Cointelpro program, counterintelligence program, didn't just fade away. It just morphed into other areas. And that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at Cointelpro in various forms on steroids.
Some have tried making a connection with what happened with the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plan and those FBI agents being involved in that with what happened on January 6th. Is there any reason to believe there is a connection there, or is that overreach?
Frankly, I don't know, but I'll say this. What happened on January 6th is very interesting that Biden and the Democrats, etc., keep talking about January 6th, but somehow they forget a man by the name of James Hodgkinson. Who is James Hodgkinson? He was a person who went and shot, literally, members of Congress as they were playing a charity baseball game.
We need medics. We got a suspect right by the baseball field in front of the YMCA. There's also a victim down in the baseball field.
Of course, he was a Democrat, a strong Bernie Sanders supporter, etc., etc. And that faction of the Democrat Party has now basically taken over the Democrats. But why do we hear about January 6th? If any crime was committed, it has been and continues to be the crime of censorship. I want to say that again, this censorship. Independents and conservatives are being censored, which is why we only get one narrative, essentially one narrative. And that, my dear sister, is fascism. That is not democracy.
And one of the reasons I left traditional news is because of so much censorship. Now, speaking of the FBI and the three-letter agencies and their ability to plant themselves in different situations, speaking of surveillance specifically, Apple has come out with this software that's going to be installed that says it's supposed to be to catch those who are participating in child abuse by sending images from our phones to human reviewers and then reporting if there's some concern. This sounds like a great thing. We know that child abuse happens. We know human trafficking happens. But is this giving a company too much power to spy on Americans?
Well, that's what it's always been about. I mean, you know, the Third Reich, the Nazi regime, said that we are doing things for the safety of our people. Yeah, right. They were doing what they were doing to get a firmer, tighter grip on the German population. That's what they were doing. We need to be extremely cautious and extremely wary, if you will, of these companies who engage in these kinds of activities. You know, the FBI, and I'm not calling the FBI a company, I'm using this as an example. The FBI and other CIA, NSA, et cetera, all seem to know about things that are going on, but don't seem to come out about it until after it has happened, okay? Now, child abuse obviously is something that is absolutely unacceptable, and it's quite real. However, we must not be dupes or dopes We must not, as H. Rap Brown said, we must not go for the ghost. Understand what these companies want. They want power. Do not trust them.
In one of the interviews that you've done in the past, you said media hasn't changed that much. Well, me coming from traditional media and having been in it for the past 20 years, it was over the past year is the reason why I decided to leave it. I saw tremendous change, but you have much more experience than me, have had different experiences. So do you still stand by that statement that media hasn't changed that much?
Well, first of all, let me interpret that statement. Media has not changed in terms of its objective, okay? Its objective is not to inform. Its objective is to what? To make others conform, okay? So in that sense, I definitely say that media, or more to the point, the objectives of so-called media have not changed that much. In fact, I would say that in the 21st century, and in the year 2021, to be specific, media has become even more insidious. We don't have journalists today. We don't have reporters today. We have repeaters. And we need real independent journalists like you, Christy.
I really like what you said there, repeaters instead of reporters. I'm going to have to remember that one. Now that I'm in independent media, some have said with some recent reports of mine that it's dangerous and irresponsible to be questioning three-letter agencies like the CDC and the FDA. It seems everyone now wants to have so much trust in everything they're hearing, and particularly these government agencies. My question is, has it always been like this? Because when I talk with my parents, they're like, something's changed. Back in my day, like nobody trusted the government. Now everybody wants to trust the government. So why do you think this next generation is so subservient and will just trust anything they hear?
Well, again, let's go back to our original point, the media. The media is extremely complicit in this, okay? The media pushes this crap. And I'll tell you what's dangerous, Christy. What's dangerous is not questioning, is accepting anything these agencies say, okay, and the government say on face value. We have many examples, okay, of the government covering up, lying, etc., etc. And I'm talking not just internationally, but domestically. For example, anyone who has not heard of the Tuskegee experiment, I would urge you to look it up, because both the federal government and state government were deeply involved in that. And there are numerous other examples. And if you don't know what the Tuskegee experiment was, look it up and you'll see the horrific things that were done to people who didn't know what was happening to them, okay, all in the name of helping them, all in the name of medicine. So I get a bit passionate about this because we need to understand. I don't care what the so-called mainstream media says. The media, first of all, is not mainstream. Let's face the reality. They are basically a propaganda machine. They fear being questioned. I repeat, they fear being questioned. And that's why we must question. Our very lives are at stake, and our republic.
When I talk about my discomfort with staying in traditional media, I usually say that there are still some good journalists out there, and I do think it's important for those that are trying to really get information out, if they're able to stay at their current mainstream organization and make a difference, they should. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like all hope is gone and people just need to cut and try and do their own thing?
All hope is never gone, never, okay? I think that we perhaps need a combination of both. That is to say, people who are in the so-called mainstream media, but we need a great deal more independent media, okay, and media persons such as herself. We need a great deal more, because these folks who may be trying to do, and I'm sure there are some who are trying to do a real job and be reporters versus repeaters, they can't do it by themselves. They've got to have help. And that help must come from we the people, everyday ordinary people like you, Christy, who have a media background, who must become independent. I repeat, independent. We need you both.
I'll be honest, though, Larry, it has been a scary journey with seeing how much people get censored and just taken off and their voices taken away. Venturing down this path, what advice would you have for me and others who are trying to make it independently, but we lack resources, we lack funding at times? How can we fight this battle?
One of the things that I think is really essential is that independent journalists, independence does not mean that you cannot have allies. Build allies. Build your allies, people that you trust, people that you know have integrity. Even though you are independent, reach out and touch, as that old song by Diana Ross and the Supremes, reach out and touch, okay, your allies. Work with them. Don't let them, and by them I mean the system, okay, put you in a position where you are by yourself. Independent does not mean you're by yourself. It means that you are an independent critical thinker, and that's what we need. We need independent critical thinkers and independent critical reporters, real reporters. So I would urge you to hook up, for lack of another word, with other allies. And I think the more you do that, the more we do that, the stronger we become.
I know we're running out of time, but I do have one last question. I know that you believe in coming together and unifying, but how do we build that bridge? There are some that if you don't hop on the Black Lives Matter, you suddenly become ostracized and called hateful names just because you won't ascribe to that ink, as you call it. So how do we build that bridge with others and show them that we do care and that we care about coming together?
Well, Black Lives Inc. And organizations like that, they already know that we do care. I'm smiling because they are such big hypocrites. Okay, they are scoundrels. They know that they are hypocrites and scoundrels. Our task, if you will, is to make sure that we continue to put out the message. It doesn't matter. We don't, the hell with their narrative, excusing my French, which is not French, but the heck with their narrative. Our narrative is the narrative of everyday, ordinary, black, white, brown, red, and yellow people, citizens of this republic. We must continue. Let's not get caught up in what they say. What they say, we should be aware of, but it's ultimately crap. It is ultimately garbage. It is ultimately propaganda. We know it, and they know it. Let's stick to the people, everyday, ordinary people. That's who is important, not these fakes, these frauds. They're disgusting, and they're dangerous.
This time went by way too fast. Do you have any final thoughts before we have to wrap this up?
Well, Christy, sister, I can only thank you for interviewing me, and I do thank you profusely for that. I also would ask that you stay strong, you maintain. This is not an easy fight. Anyone who tells you it's an easy fight is either lying or is living in illusion. So I would urge you to continue the fight. Watch your flanks, but continue the fight on all levels, because ultimately, Christy, the people will win.
All right. Thank you. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for your time, Larry.
Thank you.